Hey, what's up? It's Jared Hill, and today I wanted to talk to you about Sony's f4 16-35 zoom wide-angle lens. This is, of course, for E-mount, and it's a full-frame lens. I purchased this lens because I've actually never owned a wide-angle zoom before. As coming from Canon, Canon does have a 16-35mm wide-angle zoom, and it's a fantastic lens, and a lot of people swear by that lens, and I've always had it as a lens that I've wanted to purchase. So when this lens was announced, I thought, I'm gonna go ahead and purchase that. Instead of buying my typical go-to lens when shooting Canon was the 24-70, and Sony has a 24-70, and I haven't picked one of those up yet. But I picked this lens up because I have some Sony primes, the 35 and the 55, as well as the 70-200, and those lenses do great for all of those focal ranges. So I thought, let's go with something a lot wider. I need a wide-angle lens. Something that goes down to like 16 millimeters, and Sony didn't have, for the E-mount full frame, didn't have a wide angle lens like that as a prime. So I thought, let's try it out. Now, one of the reasons that I've never purchased a zoom wide angle is because a lot of times the zoom wide angle lenses end up having some distortion when you shoot wide, like down at 16 millimeters. You end up having distortion on the edge of the images that's so noticeable that you have to fix it in post, like in Lightroom. Now, this lens has very minimal distortion. It's almost not even detectable, depending on what you're shooting. Now, if you're shooting tall buildings or architecture, most lenses, wide lenses, regardless of the lens, is gonna have a little bit of distortion just because of what it is that you're shooting. However, this lens performs relatively well in those situations also. In shooting landscapes, very good in the areas of distortion. That was my main concern with wider lenses. In shooting photos of people and groups, this lens is my go-to lens now because of its ability to capture such a wide plane of view in front of me. Before, I typically would have to step back quite a ways with my 24mm in order to capture group shots. Now I can get up a lot closer and not have to worry about that. One of the things that stuck out to me about this lens, considering I do own several other Sony lenses now, most of them being small, is the size of the lens. It is quite a bit larger of a lens compared to a lot of the Sony E-mount lenses. Now, this lens does have optical steady shot in it, so it has optical image stabilization built into the lens. Combine that with the censored 5-axis stabilization of the A7 II, and you have quite a powerful combination of stabilization. One of the things that I've never been able to do, maybe never felt comfortable with doing, is shooting in slower shutter speeds. I typically, when shooting people, portraits, and different things, will never go down below 1/160th of a second, because any movement in the camera combined with any movement of my subject results in a photo that's not sharp. There's some blur, and I don't like that. I like my photo to be sharp, and if I want to add blur, I could do that later. Most of us want a tack sharp photo. So if I'm shooting anything lower than 1/100th of a second, I often put my camera on a tripod, and it's usually not a portrait of a person that I'm taking when I'm shooting at that shutter speed. So with this camera and this lens in particular, I'm able to shoot a lot more handheld and not have to rely on tripods in lower light situations. Though this camera does a pretty good job in low light situations, and if I put this lens on the A7S, it does even better job in low situations. Being able to slow down my shutter a little bit definitely helps out in that aspect because of having optical stabilization and stabilization on the sensor. So to me, that was one of the other items that I really was looking forward to in a lens such as this. The stabilization in the lens even by itself is fantastic. When I put this lens on the A7S, the stabilization is very good. Though there are no knobs or switches on this lens at all, the stabilization is always on in the sense of the lens. And then, you'd have to control that by going into the back of the camera and changing settings. And the same goes for your manual focus versus autofocus. You change that in the settings of the camera versus the lens. I like not having the distraction of the buttons. It's a very smooth lens. In zoom, it just feels really nice and tight. A lot of lenses, you hold your camera down and they just fall out of the focal length that you had it at. Also, manual focus is very smooth and gentle, nice and clean. One of the other concerns that I have with lenses, because I do shoot a lot of video, is the autofocus noise. A lot of these cameras these days have a continuous autofocus, and so having a lens on there that is quiet when autofocusing is very important, because if you have any noise in the lens, you might end up hearing that or even seeing that in your image, which you don't want. So this lens is extremely silent with the autofocus motor inside of it, making almost no detectable noise at all. Very fancy technology that they have in these lenses. Now, this particular lens does have a Zeiss coating on the glass, which makes for just beautiful images. That high quality glass to begin with Zeiss protective coating over the glass really makes the colors just pop out and sing. One of the things that I've noticed in taking pictures with this camera combined with this lens is that the photos just come out looking beautiful from the beginning. There's no color correction that I even really have to do to these photos because these lenses are so fantastic, and this lens is no different than what I have experienced with other Sony lenses. So the questions after I posted a photo of this lens on Instagram and on Twitter, the questions that I was getting about this lens was, how did it do with autofocus, and how was that the sharpness on the edges of the photos? And the autofocus is extremely smooth and works very well. And I'm happy to report that the edge-to-edge clarity of the photo as well as distortion along the edges is very minimal, if almost non-existent. Those are features that, of course, are very important to photographers, especially if you're a landscape or architecture photographer. So this lens definitely does add a little bit of bulk to the camera. It is not as small as the prime lenses that are E-mount lenses that Canon has available, or Sony has available with Zeiss coating on the glass. Those are very small and lightweight. This adds a bit of weight to the camera, definitely. Am I glad that I bought it? Yes, I am, because having a wide angle lens is a must for photographers. If all you have is telephoto lenses or longer zoom lenses, you miss out on a lot of opportunity of what's available in front of you. If you're a landscape photographer, most of your lenses are probably more wider angle lenses, and this lens is definitely a must-have. I was very concerned with the fact that it is an f4 lens. I come from a Canon background where all of my lenses are f2.8 or faster, with my fastest lens being an f1.2. So my concern was, am I going to be able to get the depth of field out of the photo that I'm able to get with my faster lenses coming from Canon background? I wasn't so concerned with low light situations because I could easily throw this lens on the A7S and have extremely good performance in low light. However, the f4 I was hoping wouldn't have issues with going for short depth of field. Of course, this lens does not perform as well with short depth of field as a prime lens with a 1.8 aperture, but it definitely does have nice results in the photos. As we take a look at a couple of photos that I've shot with this particular lens, going down to f4, even though it sounds like a pretty high number, the camera performs relatively well, and I get some nice images with some short depth of field that is definitely usable and definitely something that I feel is very nice. I really like the performance there. And it definitely cools my fears of f4 lenses, which most of these Sony lenses, especially the zooms, are f4. They don't go down any lower than that. Maybe they will in the future, but right now they don't. So f4 is what we have, and f4 performs relatively well. I definitely have no complaints at all. Yes, I would like it to be a wider aperture than f4, but we do what we can do, and I'm definitely not sad about the fact that these lenses only go as wide as f.4. So is this a lens that you should purchase? I would say if you are into shooting landscapes or still life photography, this is definitely going to be a lens that is a must-have for you. If you're shooting portraits or weddings or whatnot, this lens might be the second or third lens that you purchase. I would probably recommend going with the 24-70 or the 70-200 before investing in this lens. However, I am extremely glad that I purchased this lens. It is worth every dollar. The quality of the images are fantastic. Being that I'm shooting a lot of photos of my kids these days and my family, I'm indoors, and having a wider lens definitely helps, as opposed to having something that's more of a telephoto or a longer zoom. The 16-35 is just fantastic. So thanks so much for checking out this video. If you have any questions about this lens, you can ask them below this video, as well as follow along with me on Twitter @JaredHill. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.